Welcome back. We hope you're enjoying the incredible information being presented. I'm kind of blown away by all this. The next panel is a natural continuation of the connectivity topic, which you've seen Andrew's presentation is such an important part of the equation. And what a lineup we have here. Here's a quick look at a quick chat I had with Andrew. We need to get to the cloud if we want to use it. And getting to the cloud is a bit more complicated than many think. I had a chat with Andrew Grenville to ask him this. What, in your opinion, is the biggest challenge in our region when it comes to connecting to the cloud? Andrew?
Well, that's the agenda for the next panel in one line. There are a few important areas, all of which seem to be impacting cloud connectivity in our region. But if I'm forced to choose one, then I think the lack of a truly competitive telecom sector is the main thing. Why? Because it has a negative effect on provider choice, product choice, and consequently, of course, price choice when it comes to connecting to clouds. That hurts both cloud providers and cloud consumers.
Looks like we've got everybody here, Andrew. Are you ready to roll?
Ready to roll. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Good morning, everybody. And if you were listening to the last session, hello again. I'm delighted to be hosting this panel. It is an important topic, as Grant's pointed out. And even more great for me is such a fantastic lineup. We have three real industry experts and industry veterans, decades of experience amongst them across the region. So this is going to be, I hope, a firecracker of a panel. So guys, I've set the expectations high. Now you've got to deliver against it. So let's start by just allowing each of the three panel members, Ammar, Ali, and Mahesh, to do a quick 1-minute introduction, just so we understand their own background and their current role. So Ammar, can we start with you, please?
Thank you, Andrew. Great to be here in this very successful event so far. Very good sessions. My name is Ammar Hamadien. I've been in the ICT sector in the region for about 20 years plus. Worked in the UAE with Etisalat and with Zain Group in different countries, as well as I had leadership positions in West Africa. And lastly, I was the Director General of the National Information Center in Sudan. So,
thank you. Ali?
Hi, Andrew. So my background also is about 20 years in the IT industry. Telco side, I've been in here about 11 years. I've got quite a bit of experience with the cloud environment so far. I'm located in Bahrain. AWS has a region in Bahrain, and we started doing direct connect, providing direct connectivity for our customers to the AWS data centers. So I'm very well aware of the challenges that are present in that environment, and then moving on to other forms of connectivity as well across government sector, large enterprises, small businesses. So I've had experience with all of these, and especially in terms of financial sector adoption. That's my strong suit, yes.
Thank you. And last but I'm sure not least, Mahesh.
Thank you, Andrew, and it's wonderful to be on the panel. My name is Mahesh Jaishankar. I'm the CEO of ARC. ARC is a joint venture between DO and Batelco. We are a regional middle mile provider. We connect data centers across. We provide services to cloud providers, hyperscalers, carriers in the region, connecting them from a data center to another data center or the last mile. So that's what we do. We're just about a year old and based out of UAE and Bahrain. And we have presence in Muscat, in Bahrain, UAE, shortly in Saudi and in Israel. So that's ARC.
Excellent. Thank you, Mahesh. And as context in my day job, when I'm not working for OMID on the MENA projects, I'm the CEO of Oryxcom. We're a regional managed service provider. Connectivity, particularly cloud connectivity, and IT managed services. So collectively, we've got a lot of knowledge across the region. So as a kickoff, we're all familiar with talking to customers who share frustrations about connectivity across the region. maybe just give me your top 3 issues you have about the challenges of connecting to the cloud in the region. And I'll start with you, Mahesh, go in reverse order this time. just the top 3 summary. We'll dive in a bit later.
So I have a slightly different view on that, and I probably take from that. I think the biggest pain point isn't technology per se. I think it's also the ability to migrate to cloud. That's putting the holistic solution together rather than only the connectivity solution. And 2 of my shareholders at ARC are telcos, so I'll speak in the control of that. And I think the connectivity is available, but it's just about putting all those solutions together. The pain point remains that the flow of internet in the region is suboptimal, and that, if it's addressed, could give you far greater connectivity to the cloud. So to my point, the success of the UAE IX and the various IX internet exchanges that are coming could ease a lot of these pain points that are there. Obviously, the cost of connectivity is something that does get spoken about, but that is coming down, and we have seen that the decrease in the price over the past few years. But from my point, it's basically the throttle point is the inefficiency in the way the internet tends to be routed in the region.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. All right. And Ali, what do you think are the top 3 issues in terms of cloud connectivity?
I think it's an unfair question right now. So considering the last talk you just did, the presentation, I think you laid out all the problems very well. So it's hard to top that up. But I'll just go based on your presentation. You're right. The biggest challenges that we've seen in terms of connectivity to cloud is simply just cost. Cost is quite expensive, like you showed, compared to the rest of the world, and it makes people think twice before they consider actually moving over to the cloud. Now, besides that, there's also the reliability of the connectivity. Recently, now this is very recent history, we've seen that the quality of the connectivity has increased drastically, especially with fiber to the premises. But like you said, fiber to the home penetration is very high. That is the same in Bahrain also. I believe Bahrain was number 4 in that list for. So those, with the advent of fiber connectivity for all premises, the quality has improved drastically, but the cost factor is still there. Also, then in terms of connectivity, it depends on what workloads all the customers are using. Every customer has a different requirement. Mahesh was talking about the cloud migration. There's many other aspects to it as well. So in terms of if somebody's going to deploy public-facing workloads, they don't really care about last mile connectivity as much. It's the cloud provider's responsibility. But what we see dealing with our customers, they're all enterprises. These are commercial entities, and they want to have direct connectivity. It's their users that are accessing these workloads, right? So these are the challenges that I've seen.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And Ammar, if there's anything left that the other guys haven't covered, please add it.
No, I think they covered it very well, but I'd like to add a couple of points here. I think one of the challenges or the pain points for cloud adoption is actually the way the cloud contracts are administered. I think the way that the security posture in the cloud sort of contracts need to be made a little bit easier. And I think leadership in organizations of all sizes should prioritize and push their IT departments to adopt cloud, because we often see misalignment between IT people like Ali and the business side or the commercial side of the business, who are comfortable with the legacy systems they have been working on, and they don't like to be disrupted. And that needs to be adopted at higher level of organization. Also, another pain point I see is configuration of cloud systems. that needs to also be made a little bit easier. So it becomes a mainstream service in all types of organizations, because if the physical and logical configurations are not made easy, it becomes a pain point, and it becomes a pushback from business users. So
okay, yeah, thank you. They're all good points. So if we look at the current state of play across the region, particularly when it comes to the main cloud service providers, we have AWS in Bahrain and stated and soon be opening in the UAE. We have Oracle in UAE and Saudi. We have Microsoft in the UAE, but notably nothing in Qatar. So just interested in the perspective of clouds that are in country and clouds that are out of country, and how the connectivity particularly is impacted by that. So Mahesh, let's start with you on that.
Sure. I think Google did announce, just to add to your point, I think Google did announce that they are opening a cloud region in Qatar. So I think there is traction into Qatar that way. There was a very good point that Ammar touched upon in the last, which was the contract. And I think just to add to that point, I think there is a mismatch in contracts between the cloud, the way the cloud contracts are handled and the telecom contracts are handled. And that should get addressed. And you know it as well as I do, in terms of the fact that the telecom contracts tend to be a year fixed contracts, whereas the cloud contracts are extremely flexible. And I think that needs to percolate down into the telecom networks. And that is, I know I'm going off topic here, but I think Ammar touched upon it very nicely. I think that is something that will get addressed in the few years. And that's something that we at ARC are trying to do, where we can give flexible contracts in the same way, virtualized like a cloud. To your question on whether onshore or offshore, I think obviously onshore makes more sense. It's closer, physics, the latency would be better. But obviously it's not possible to address all of the regions in the same format. And I think the OTTs, the hyperscalers are creating mini regions for smaller countries, and they're creating larger cloud regions for bigger markets. So I think they are addressing it, and there's also obviously the requirement for data to be in country that drives a lot of that deployment. So as a provider who would provide direct cloud connectivity, you would always want onshore connectivity being available. The customer experience is definitely much superior.
Mm-hmm. And Ali, on the related point, we're faced with the reality across the region that whilst all connectivity costs are higher here compared to the West, when we look at international, it's sky high. So that onshore, offshore is also skewed by whether you're accessing a cloud, for example, from Qatar that happens to reside in the UAE. So any thoughts around this?
So onshore versus offshore. Now, provided the reliability of the connectivity is equal, it makes no difference. The reliability is the deciding factor there. It's the biggest factor. Well, besides price. Let's ignore price for now. So I don't really, there was a talk earlier, it was Yasmin from AWS. She made a point that they were talking about data residency. And data residency, again, we're talking about onshore. But the nature of cloud services, it's reachable, accessible via anywhere. So it does not make any sense to talk in terms of offshore and onshore when your workloads are technically in the virtual space, which can be reached from any location in the world. Now, in the region, when we talk about adoption and last mile connectivity or onshore offshore connectivity, this is a region where the regional operators kind of need to work together to come up with solutions that are it's going to be a win-win for the countries themselves. I don't even mean the operators themselves, but in terms of national goals that we want to achieve, it requires cooperation between all these different operators that are present in the region. If we can make that happen, I'm sure we can come up with very cost-effective means of delivering customers from anywhere in this region to any cloud provider in the region, whether it's in the same country or on the other side of the GCC, considering we're in the Gulf.
Yeah, and just elaborate a bit more on when you say cooperation between the operators. What sort of things would you ideally want to see?
Well, one of the things is jurisdiction. Let's say the licensing for telecoms to be able to provide services. Obviously, me being from a Bahraini ISP, Infonas, I cannot provide telecom services in any of the other countries, UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman, nowhere. So I need to partner up or have a relationship with one of the local operators that are in country. So that is simply just coming up to some sort of a win-win type situation, an agreement, a mutually agreed upon kind of parameters to where we can make sure that we are not really we're not really thinking in terms of we have to make the most money out of this individual deal. We have to look at a more holistic approach over time. How are we going to make this a success over the next 5 years, to the next 10 years? These are the things us operators have to consider when we're talking to each other and coming up with agreements for these.
Yeah. Okay. So Ammar, just to look a little bit deeper, as Ali pointed out, clouds can be accessed by anybody on the planet. It doesn't matter where they are. And most customers, if you look at the volume, most customers just use the internet. They'll maybe run a VPN, but they'll use the regular internet. And of course, then the issue is latency, data sovereignty, but the physical location of the cloud is less relevant. It's reachable. But when we come to the bigger enterprises, we want that direct connectivity with a product like Direct Connect AWS or Express Route from Microsoft or Fast Connect from Oracle. They generally won't run across the internet. They then ask for something like an MPLS or an Ethernet. So in that context, do you see any challenge between the onshore versus offshore? I think you might be on mute, Ammar. Oh, I think we might have lost him now.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure he'll rejoin. The show must go on. So Mahesh, I mean, you understand that context as well. SMEs tend to use internet, and the bigger companies want direct connectivity. That clearly has a role to play, right, in this onshore-offshore debate.
Absolutely. If you look at it, what is it that the customer wants with a direct connection is predictable performance. And so the key is that you want predictable performance. And the good thing is internet in the region in most of the countries is fairly strong. So you could get fairly predictable performances, but some of the large customers, like what you mentioned, that they don't want to take that risk. They would like to have a nailed up circuit that kind of gives them the security, the peace of mind, and then hence they pay for it. So the point that we have seen is that the private connection is for the predictable performances. Most of the operators are pegging it at a price that is a discounted price from a standard Ethernet price or a MPLS price. So I think there is a traction on it, and that product will gain momentum. And but to most of the SMEs, internet provides a fairly decent performance, and they would, I think, stay on it with a product that's a SASE or a VPN based product that comes. Sorry, Ammar, I pitched in when we lost you. So
apologies, I don't know what happened here.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad you're back with us, Ammar. So we were still exploring the difference between SMEs tending to use internet and the bigger companies wanting that private direct connectivity. So do you have any further points to make on that?
Yes, I just have, we need to think and be mindful of the scalability of applications that SMEs will use. So while they might be satisfied with internet at this time, technology is evolving, and there are many applications that will require them to re-strategize their connectivity plans going forward. And we're getting into the metaverse now, and that is going to change a lot of the strategies that small business and startups are looking into the future. Also, blockchain is also something that is making small companies look into different revenue streams and different products to serve the markets with. So I think we need to have a forward-looking strategy in terms of connectivity, direct internet or direct connection, and have companies be able to make choices that are not economically restrained and regulatory restrained as well.
Yeah, and I think as my avatar said at the start of the presentation, start of the panel, I think the lack of choice of connectivity providers is really at the heart of some of these challenges. Mahesh has pointed out that many of the regional telcos do provide cloud connectivity at a discounted level to standard product. But the reality is, I mean, and we know the pricing, those of us that work in this world, those prices still remain extremely high compared to other markets such as the West. So I think there is an opportunity there to figure out how to grow that pie. And I recognize the telcos have a perfect right to get money from customers, and they are expected to do that by their shareholders, which are often government. But I think there's an opportunity there for them to be more imaginative. So Ammar, just coming back to you again, what would you see that they could do in the context of maybe a carve out of regulation or some specific services around cloud connectivity to help address this price and cost issue?
Yes, I think regulatory issues or regulatory constraints are paramount to be addressed. I think we need to look into progressive regulatory regimes in the region and be on the same speed with technology. I realize that data sovereignty is an issue in the region. However, consumer demand as well as technology are actually challenging that concept. So while we have to strike a balance between sovereignty and economies of scale and progressiveness, we need to revisit the regulatory regimes and also be mindful of something that's very important, which is protecting consumers' data on the cloud. I've seen countries like Bahrain who have frameworks for regulating data protection on the cloud, and I hope that other countries in the Middle East follow suit.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point.
Yes, there is a big alignment between the data protection regulations in Bahrain when it comes to the cloud and the GDPR. And I think Bahrain has set a very good base. Qatar also recently started working on something like that. And I think if we have a regional framework for data protection in the cloud, that will make things a lot easier.
Yeah, Ali, let me ask you a question in a similar area. So that it's not the core topic of this, but the issue of data traveling across the internet and general data in transit is something that customers consider. And certainly when it comes to that choice of running across the internet or choosing to pay a premium for a dedicated pipe, I think that's factored in, right? Are you seeing any of that feedback from your customers about concern over data privacy?
Yes. In the early days of us entering into the cloud arena, the number one issue everybody talked about was security of their information in the cloud. Actually, the security is a core issue when we talk about cloud in general. I'll go back to your point where you're talking about large enterprises desiring direct connectivity to the cloud, right? This is all related to information security. Information security is not just encryption, protecting it from hackers, etc. It's the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The direct connectivity is related to the availability aspect. It's with direct connectivity, you can get very high SLAs. You can have guarantees from the providers that your systems will be accessible X percentage of time. So it impacts your business continuity, right? At the end of the day, it's the business that you need to run. If you can't access your systems, you cannot run your business. So that's the issue there. Now, when we talk about security in terms of encryption, protecting the data from prying eyes, so that is, I don't really see a difference between using it over the internet or using it over a direct connectivity. Because if you do not encrypt your data over either of these channels, you're transmitting it open. Somebody could penetrate your telco, get the data from there. It could be flowing through who knows how many facilities. Somebody could tap it from there. Internet, same story. So in terms of encrypting your data in transit between direct connectivity and the internet, there's really no difference. That's why I keep going back to, it's the performance, it's the reliability of the connectivity. That's the real question.
Yeah. And I think this issue of the perception that running data across the internet is inherently less secure than running it across a dedicated connection is so embedded in the mindset in the region that it does affect a lot of thinking. I mean, the reality is, if you run, for example, using an alternative technology like SD-WAN across the regular internet, it's AES 256-bit encrypted. It's as secure, if not more so, than MPLS. So yes. I'm sure some of this is perception. But Mahesh, I mean, you talk to carriers as well as big end customers. What's your take on this issue of security connectivity?
So I agree with Ali's point that, and the point that you made, that whether it is the internet or the MPLS, the security obviously is paramount to what you do at home and how you configure your systems and what kind of encryptions and protection systems you have in place. And that does not change. What I've found from the carriers is that they find it easier, and I think they propagate the perception also that the MPLS is inherently stronger and gives you a secure private network versus the internet, so it is a perception thing, but the large corporates like the MPLS still, and I think it has still got some legs for the next 5 years where MPLS will continue. But I think one of the biggest challenge that the cloud adoption does is it opens up far more fronts that you need to cover for your security. So if you are in the cloud, it's generally not a singular cloud deployment that you have as an enterprise. So if you look from an enterprise point of view, you would have a CRM, you would have an ERP, so there are multiple cloud deployments that you have, and there are more fronts that you need to cover to do it. So which obviously, to what point that Ali was mentioning, is that it starts with your policies at home and how do you configure and what the amount of thought you have put in your IT strategy that covers all of that. And I think that is key, and the amount of preparation that goes into having the cloud strategy, that is paramount. It's not like a switch. You switch on and say, I'm on the cloud. I mean, it's a far more deep thought. It needs a lot more deep thought into it.
Yeah. So one of the topics that came out when we did the survey for the connectivity report was that there is quite a lack of awareness across the region amongst users that there is even a problem with the cost of connectivity until they ask about it. So we had this many times as OryxCom talking to customers who are looking at a cloud migration journey, and there's plenty of issues around that bit anyway. And then at some point during that, they say, fine, let's go and get a quote for a gigabit connection. And they fall off the chair because it's tens and tens of thousands of dollars a month, and it kills the cloud business case in its entirety. So Ammar, are you getting any sense that the region needs to be better educated on some of these cost challenges when it comes to connectivity, and would that help in the overall shift of that commercial landscape?
Yes, definitely. There is a great lack of understanding of how the cloud business model will work from a consumer perspective. So I think a clear mechanism of cost management is important. Of course, with transparency on how costs of the cloud services are managed and billed to the customer, because that's a big discouraging point, especially if they start using it and then they don't understand the costing model. They get to retract their commitment to migrating to the cloud.
Yeah.
Also, I think there is somewhat lack of expertise on how to actually interact with cloud applications on all levels, and maybe shows like this and conference like this will heighten and raise the awareness, hopefully, very soon. Also, I think there should be a fair amount of assurances when it comes to control and governance of their data in the cloud. So they need to be assured of how their data is governed on the cloud. So I think these three elements will encourage open minds of consumers and have a different outlook into becoming cloud users.
Yeah, and Ali, you talk to customers as part of your day job, and do you sense that there's a sticker shock almost when they get the price of connectivity that they need optimally for their cloud project?
Generally, yes, there is. So this is one of the things I tried to prepare them right from the beginning to let them understand that they are moving their infrastructure from the room next door into a facility that's several kilometers away at the very least. So physics comes into play, latency comes into the picture. I'll give you an example. I had a workload migration. The customer wanted this database migrated over to the cloud because it just made more sense. The reliability, the business continuity aspect, all checked their boxes. So they moved just the database, not the application. Now, all of a sudden, between the application and the database, instead of having a 1 millisecond latency, they have a 15, 20 millisecond latency. And you compound that by dozens of queries running at the same time, all of a sudden, their user experience just went through the floor. So, yes, sometimes they're not aware that there are aspects of connectivity that they need to consider, even besides the price. Of course, the price is a shocker, but besides that, there's lots of issues related to connectivity that have to be considered.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Mahesh, I wanted to come back to something that you said at the start, and that was related to the optimal flow of IP around the region, and particularly things like IXs. Now, not everyone on this conference is necessarily an expert on how internet traffic flows and how IXs flow. So maybe just give a sort of high level of what that even means, and then some ideas around what could be improved.
Sure. So typically, the way, if one of our, and thank you, Andrew, for kind of picking that up. So the way the flow of the user, let's say the user has migrated his data to the cloud, and the cloud instance or the cloud is in Bahrain, for example, and the customer is in UAE. And if the internet service provider hasn't connected it directly to the cloud provider, the traffic could actually trombone down to Europe and come back, or to the nearest common point both the ISPs connect to, which is not going to be the fastest route available. So I think a lot of those inefficiencies come into the performance of for the customer. So that a lot of times we have seen it where there is a cloud instance in country, and the customer's traffic actually goes around to UK or Singapore and comes back, and that obviously results in really bad customer experiences. If Ali was talking about 15 milliseconds, this would be about 300 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds by the time it comes in. But obviously, there is a better sense of that in all the telcos today, and there are peering managers who try to manage this better. But it needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed, and there has to be a clear strategy on. So UAE IX has done a lot in terms of bringing a lot of that traffic here. I think Petelco with its Manama IX is trying to do similar. And you will have similar regional IX initiatives in Saudi and in other countries, which would hopefully change this perspective and change this traffic flow and probably get us into the 90s, where 90% of the traffic remains in the region, remains optimally connected.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think that's a very valid point. And I mean, those traffic flows have been a challenge from day one in the region. And as you say, the fact that traffic from Saudi to the UAE might go via Europe, to me, just makes no sense at all. But
Absolutely.
It's a reality still. Yes.
But it's got better.
Yeah, it's got a lot better.
In the last 10 years, we have seen it go from 40% to about 70-75% of the traffic remains in the region.
Right.
So I think it's all the telcos have done well to bring it to that point, but still 30% of the traffic still goes suboptimally to Europe or to Singapore and comes back. So.
Yeah. Okay. No, good. Okay. So look, we're just coming to the last few minutes. So I'm going to ask you each to give me a sort of, what would your top 3 recommendations be now that we've chatted through the topic, having started with the pain points and talked through several of them. It would be good just to get a summary of how you think we could improve things. That doesn't mean us as individuals, but us as a region, what areas they're going to be. So I don't know if anyone wants to volunteer, otherwise I will pick a victim to start with that.
I'd like to start.
Okay, Ali start.
Ali wants to get the good plums first before anyone else.
Exactly.
So in terms of the region, how we can improve the ecosystem, I think the regulators have a role to play in this. Like Mahesh said, the telcos have worked well over the last 5 to 10 years to improve how the data remains localized. But there's nothing, even let's say, I'll take the example of Bahrain. There's no sort of regulation that requires the local operators to peer weave each other to ensure that the data stays local. And I believe this is the case with all the other countries. So imagine regulation coming in and requiring this, which is a simple enough solution. It's not very complicated. It's a matter of will. So you have the regulation come in, all of a sudden, all inter-country data is localized. We are part of the GCC, so that shouldn't be much more of an ask to say, okay, between the GCC countries, data should be localized as well. So the regulators have a part to play over here. Right. The telcos from our side, I liked your suggestion earlier in terms of providing connectivity that is designed for cloud usage. That is something that could be very beneficial. But besides that, us having the cloud operators come and establish presence here with Google, AWS, Microsoft, they either are already present in the middle of implementing or planning on coming on board. Yeah. Once they are here, I truly believe we're going to see a whole different landscape. It's going to look nothing like what it is now.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So Ammar, in a minute and a half maximum, please.
Yes, I concur with Ali's first point about regulations. I think today, while there is no specific cloud law, there is sort of a mixed matrix of rules and regulations that have touch points on the cloud, and I think it's time to sort of carve out cloud-specific regulations that, as I said earlier, that adapt with technology. And to Ali's second point, actually, about localizing GCC data, I think a few years ago there was an initiative of a cross-border data migration initiative between Saudi, Bahrain, and UAE. And I think that needs to be scaled up and sort of generalized across the GCC region, considering the potential economic and social impact of doing so.
Okay, yeah, no, good points, thank you. So Mahesh, anything left for you to say?
Yes. Something slightly, I would steer away from the regulatory part, and I would look at it from a commercial angle. I think what the telcos could do is something on the contracts for the Cloud Connect, where they make it as flexible as the cloud contracts itself, where you can scale up and down, you can tear down circuits, you can upgrade circuits on a much shorter time span. You could do it for 5 days, for 10 days, which is not possible today. And I think that is something that they can work on very quickly. It's just a commercial construct that can be built in. So I think that is where I would go first. Before the regulations would take time. You're looking at a 3-4 years time frame. So
good. Thank you. Okay, so look, gents, we've pretty much hit the time limit. So thank you so much for your wonderful insights. I hope people found those as interesting as I did. And just to reiterate, for anyone who didn't watch the previous session, Middle East North Africa Cloud Association just published a paper on the cost of connectivity in the region. You can access that on the MENACA website. And many of the points that these very informed panelists have made are within that paper. So please go ahead, download it, and feedback as necessary. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much, gentlemen. That was a very good panel. Appreciate your inputs.
Thank you.
Grant, over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen. It kind of shocks me to think our life is that controlled by milliseconds. So thank you so much. Again, deep information shared. And here's to zero pain points, right? I'm sure our opinion piece, like Andrew just said, will include a lot of those points raised by you gentlemen. So thank you again. All right, so on to the next panel. I'm very excited about this one, folks. We have some heavyweight thought leaders on this panel, and they're going to talk about how governments can leverage the cloud and make digital transformation a reality. The next question is super interesting. It's about cloud and digital transformation for governments. To prepare for the session, I asked Mike Mudd a question. Digital transformation means different things to different organizations. What's it mean to governments? Mike?
Cloud to the government really enables government to work 24/7 to deliver services on demand to their customers on their devices as they wish to interact with government. This has been shown to be very important recently because of the pandemic, but this is really part of the digital transformation going forward. Governments themselves really need to align with the technology and the 24/7 world of the citizens themselves. Citizens do not want to stand in line. They do not want to spend a lot of time interacting, in a personal way, but on an electronic way, the way that they deal with their banking, for example, now. So I think that is one of the most important things in digitization, is to be able to provide the facilities and to be able to find the depths of services that governments want today.